Limerence, which is the obsessive longing for someone, actually activates the same brain pathways as physical pain. So we literally feel it in our bones, as if love itself could cut us open, or what we actually think is love. So here's a poem that could perhaps illustrate a little bit of the pain that you feel in limerence. And yet, it doesn't feel like that when you are in it, right? Because limerence, it feels like devotion, it feels like fate, like destiny, like the heavens actually put the both of you together, like something sacred you're not allowed to let go of. But limerence is nothing like love. Hi, I'm Sonia, writer, psychologist, spiritual guide, and intuitive mentor. This channel is a home for soulful teachings on healing, love wounds, intuition, creativity, energy, and so much more. You'll receive grounded insights, energetic frameworks, and spiritual guidance to help you come home to yourself and live a life of deep resonance, clarity, and soul expansion. Subscribe now and journey together with me toward a life that feels like home to your soul. So this is a bit of a story about myself, and when I was back when I was limerent. So I remember one evening, the kind that doesn't really quite end because the day has already started kind of wrong. Things have already happened and I wasn't feeling very good already, and I was pretty tired. Okay, so I was sitting in my car outside my apartment and I was just staring at this guy's chat. Okay, this WhatsApp chat that I was having with this guy that I was limerent for. And I was just staring at the fact that he had just read my message and hadn't replied again. Okay, so with this person, there was a very strange interaction between the both of us. So in person, it was actually fine and he was actually pretty friendly and very flirtatious. But when it came to text messages, it was very strange. He would never reply me like 95% of the time. And the other 5% of the time, it would be like just randomly, like random replies. He would just reply a haha, or he would just send me some random like joke that he saw on social media, but no substantial replies. And I remember it was around like 6-ish in the evening. I was tired, I hadn't had my dinner, and my Spotify playlist kept looping Kylie Minogue's song, Get Out of My Way, which is actually so poignant when I actually think about it now. But back then, all I could think was, maybe he's just busy, maybe he's just like really caught up with something at work. Maybe he'll reply me tomorrow, which, well, these were excuses and reasons that I actually had been telling myself for the longest time at a time, whenever he didn't reply me. So that kind of like maybe became like my mantra, when it came to this guy. And the irony is, he actually never promised me anything. Okay, he never talked about like a relationship. He never talked about like taking me out on like proper dates. We actually went out, but it didn't feel very official to me. And whenever I tried to push for something, he kind of slithered away and didn't want to tell me like what was going on. But because of all his hot and cold behaviors, and because of the way I was actually wired at that point in time, I kind of took all his lack of replies, lack of responses, his kind of disinterest, and I actually built like an entire future out of all his breadcrumbing behaviors. Because I thought that, if I could be good enough, if I were patient enough, if I were understanding enough, radiant enough, bright enough, he would actually see me eventually and actually commit to something. Okay, but the truth is that this guy had never really wanted me in the way that I wanted him to. Okay, like I wanted a relationship with him, but that was not what he wanted at the time. And refusing to actually pay attention to that and refusing to actually listen to that, I became caught up in a loop with him where I was kind of just going on my own fantasy of how this relationship would actually play out, whereas he was just not even engaging at all. And in doing so, I was bending over backwards for him and trying to analyze all these breadcrumbs that he was giving me. And in the entire process, I actually had forgotten about myself. I had stopped seeing myself. I was invisible to myself. By the time when I was like deep in my obsession with him, its obsession looking back at it. I had completely stopped working on my hobbies. I stopped reading. I stopped being sporty. I was actually someone that went hiking twice a week. I completely stopped that because I wanted to be, somehow subconsciously wanted to be available for him, whenever he texted me back, or if he wanted to, go for dinner or lunch or whatever it is, I kind of subconsciously wanted to be available for him. Okay, so that was a very, very painful part of one of the limerent episodes in my life. And if you're someone that, is going through limerence, you probably have experienced something quite similar before. So I just want to say that limerence is not just a crush or a passing infatuation that is gonna fade immediately. Okay, it's really an emotional addiction to fantasy, and it's a mental cycle where you are constantly caught up in a cycle of hope, of reward, of withdrawal, and then collapsing and feeling devastated, and then feeling happy again when your limerent object smiles at you, texts you back. It's this constant cycle that you can't really break out of. And you then start to believe that your worth, your self-worth, is actually directly tied to how much this person, this limerent object, actually desires you. But beneath it, often, when you scratch the surface of why you are actually even attracted to this dynamic and attracted to this person who doesn't even really want you, there's often things like early attachment wounds. Okay, maybe you felt overseen, or you weren't really visible in that sense to your caregivers or to adults or to people around you when you were younger. This is something I experienced. A second thing could be, a deep yearning for safety and validation and affection. Okay, everybody wants to feel safe in this world. They want to feel validated. They want to feel like their feelings matter, that they matter. And we all want to feel belonged, and we all want to be liked and feel loved, right? So whenever we have that deep yearning for these things and we are actually not seeing it in our lives, it can actually lead us into, more into the fantasy space. Because we're not seeing it in our reality, we actually get drawn into the fantasy or into the mental activity of thinking about how it would feel like if a specific person would be desiring us. Okay, so when you have a deep yearning for affection and you're not seeing it in your real life, this is where your fantasy world then becomes very active. Another thing you could be, observing as well, if you scratch the surface of all your, all the psychological stuff, is that there is also a nervous system, your nervous system, okay, that's actually grown addicted to intensity, to anxiety, to emotional highs and lows, kind of like an emotional roller coaster. And you kind of prefer that, find that familiar, find that normal, okay, instead of intimacy. Intimacy is very gentle, it's slow, but there's a build-up. Okay, so when you get emotionally intimate with someone, just think about how when you're trying to get to know someone new, like a new friend, you do start from somewhere, but it gradually builds up to something, right? It doesn't start off really, really intensely and very hot and heavy, and then it just peters out. So intimacy is something that we are trying to achieve, but instead of filtering out our life experiences for intimacy, we start to get very, very addicted to emotional highs and lows, like the excitement. People talk about fireworks and chemistry and looks and superficial things like that. But all that is not very long lasting. You feel this intense desire for someone, but intensity, chemistry, and anything that feels too exciting actually triggers your nervous system, okay, to respond in ways that make you feel very anxious and make you addicted to the anxiety and to the dopamine rush, instead of the calmness and the soothingness of intimacy that is a little bit slower. So sometimes limerence happens when you've already given up on love in the real world. Okay, this could happen in several scenarios because I've seen this with many of my clients. So perhaps you don't see love around you anymore. Okay, maybe you were looking for a certain kind of love. Maybe you were in relationships before, but you haven't really experienced or met someone that has given you that same kind of feeling. So we all, like I said earlier, have a need for affection and love and liking. So when we don't see it in our reality, the heart then chooses a fantasy. Okay, we fall in love in our minds with someone, and it feels safer because this person can't really reject us or can't really like be mean to us or anything like that. The nervous system finds something to cling to. Okay, anything that feels alive. Okay, it could be like a celebrity, someone that you have never met before in your life. It could be this guy that you see at your bus stop like every single morning on your commute to work. Okay, it doesn't have to be someone that you actually really know for limerence to happen. And when people get very caught up in their limerence cycles, they tend to come to me and say like, oh, I don't feel like this is curable. I don't feel like I can be normal again. But what I want to say is that healing is completely possible. Okay, I mean, I'm a living example of that. And what I want to say is that it doesn't really begin, simply with just getting over them. Okay, it's not about getting over someone, because like all these psychological wirings and all these things that are happening beneath the surface, the things that I was actually talking about earlier, it's not so straightforward. But what I want to actually emphasize is that you need to take the attention, the focus, and the obsession from them and turn it back to you. Okay, because the healing from limerence is absolutely possible, but it has to begin with coming back to yourself, being interested in yourself and in your life again. A lot of limerent people, at least quite a number that I've actually seen, don't show any interest to themselves. Okay, they struggle with self-love, they reject themselves, they abandon their beliefs, they struggle with boundaries or maybe don't even have boundaries. So limerence is something also that happens when your emotional boundaries are also lacking. I may talk about this in this video or in another video, but it's when you don't actually draw lines, in certain areas in your life. But healing is absolutely possible. When you're in limerence, okay, your brain scans for micro rewards, like someone, your limerent object liking a post. Okay, maybe he replies your text. Even a haha or, an okay is like amazing for you. Maybe he glances at you. That's also a micro reward. He smiles at you. He looks at you. He remembers your name. He remembers what you ate for lunch. Okay? So you're wired into a loop of craving and then being rewarded in some way, but then crashing after that, because these rewards are very, very micro and they are not sustainable. Okay? They are not like long-term, like emotionally stable or emotionally intimate patterns that this person is actually trying to build up with you. They are all very, very micro things. So one of the most powerful things that I teach clients is state management. Okay, STATE. You can train your body to feel safe without your limerent object. So you can try it right now. Okay, you can pause this video and try it after this as well. Just place one hand on your heart. Okay, you can feel your breath, feel your breathing. Inhale slowly for 4 counts. Deep inhale. Hold it for 4 counts as well. And then exhale for 6 counts. Like really exhale, like breathe through your mouth and just let out a huge sigh. Repeat that over and over again for a minute or more if you can. I actually do this breathing exercise like 5 to 10 minutes every day. And then affirm to yourself, I choose you meaning yourself. I choose you. I see you. I am here. These, whenever you think of your limerent object, doing this, the breathing exercise and affirming in the moment actually interrupts the high-seeking loop, which is, it helps you to ground in presence and in reality instead of the obsession and the mental fantasy that actually exists in your head. So these state management is actually something called a neuro-linguistic practice, or NLP practice, and as I'm NLP practitioner certified, these are some of the things I actually try my clients. So some of the practices you can try is the one of the bigger ones in NLP is the swish pattern. Okay, what you do is that you replace mental imagery of your limerent object with a very, very radiant, successful image of your future self. Constantly see that placement happening in your head. Something that I really like to do is that I imagine my limerent object's face on like a whiteboard, and then I imagine myself cleaning off his image from the whiteboard and then pasting or drawing my own face there. do that often enough, and your brain will then get used to that effect of switching or learning to switch from a limerent object to you whenever his image or his thoughts about him actually pop up in your head. Okay, the second practice you can try is called anchoring, where you create a physical gesture like touching your wrist, touching your forehead, something like that links to a calm state that you actually practiced. Okay, so what I like to do is that whenever I'm feeling like I want to feel good, I actually put on hand cream. Okay, so hand cream for me links to calmness, it links to my breathing exercise, it links to me feeling better than what I want to feel. So anchoring is something that you can use for anything at all, for any emotion, and you can, be creative and use any kind of physical gesture that you can think of. Another NLP practice that you may be interested in is called the reframing language. And I love this, okay, because I feel that language are like spells. They are very, very, they play a very big part in how we actually see ourselves and how we actually see life, right? So when you reframe language, you can, whenever you are when you say like, oh, I miss him, or like, oh, I love him and stuff like that, catch yourself and shift it gently to, well, I miss being seen by myself. And phrases like, I'm learning to see myself, instead of constantly putting your focus or putting like your thoughts onto him, because our language actually reflects what we are thinking and what we believe. So whatever we are talking about at that point in time and whatever fills our minds would be the things that we actually keep talking about. Okay, so reframing your language is very, very helpful. So these tools can help to rewire your emotional landscape. I also work with elemental psychology. Okay, it's a framework a 5-element framework that I use, and it's also in certain Eastern Asian spaces. It's called BaZi. It's a very ancient Chinese metaphysical way of reading energy, and I really, really love it because it's so different from astrology and anything out there that I've actually come into contact with before. It's all about your energy patterns, and I use BaZi to actually understand love patterns and to understand why you are attracted to certain people, why you're drawn to certain relationships, why certain people work for you and why certain people don't, things like that. So for example, in BaZi, that's like, or in elemental psychology, there are different like naturally occurring elements that we actually look into. So there's wood, fire, water, earth, and metal. And one of the elements, each element has its own like, if it's out of balance or if it's underbalanced, you will have all sorts of issues, in your life. And then all you have to do is just try to balance the element again. Okay, I will have another introduction video on this, but for today, I would just like to talk about in the context of limerence. So if you're someone who has a very strong wood element in your birth chart or in your energetic space, or you carry something called the rock wealth star, okay? Interestingly, I carry both of these very strongly, okay, in my chart. When you have these two like factors in your chart, you may be wired to actually reach out to people a little bit more than you should, because wood is, think about wood, you are growing, a tree needs to grow upwards, it needs to grow outwards, right? And when you do that, you sometimes grow beyond your boundaries. You can see like some of the bigger trees, like the roots have actually overgrown the ground that they were actually in, right? So wood people tend to see the potential in other people. Okay, you tend to see like, oh, this person is actually good for this person is good for that. The thing about seeing potential in other people is that you may be the only one seeing it in them. They may not actually think they have that potential, or they may know that they have that potential, but they have no interest or no capability to develop that potential to its like fullest power. Okay, so you could just be riding on potential that actually never appears or never exists in reality. Okay, it's always hidden in a person. So wood people and rock wealth people as well, we tend to actually give way more, okay, to the person before checking whether it's actually mutual. And being a rock wealth, like very strong rock wealth star person in myself, I struggle a lot with boundaries, and I talked about this earlier. Limerence is all about having very weak boundaries. When you struggle with boundaries, you tend to overgive and tend to bend backwards for people, or play this people-pleasing kind of character or persona where you try to do everything to make the person happy, but the person doesn't really appreciate it, and then you feel very resentful and very unhappy at the end of it. Okay, so other things that you might struggle with if you have a very strong wood element or Rockwell's star element in your chart, you may struggle with, pouring energy into people who feed off you. They feed off your energy because you're so open, so kind, you're so pleasing, and you make them feel good. So they feed off your energy. And I've had so many people like that in my life that when I started to learn BaZi and started to really understand myself, I had to really kind of stop being around them so much because it was so draining. Okay, and another thing that you might struggle with as well sometimes is that you mistake stimulation, or you mistake just friendly banter in a social setting or small talk. You mistake that for genuine connection, and you mistake that for interest in furthering emotional intimacy. I've made this mistake so many times, where people are just talking to me normally but actually think they are really, really interested in me, or they really want to get to know me as a person. Okay, so those are some of the things that you might struggle with. But that same wood energy, okay, when it's balanced or when it's reclaimed, it becomes visionary, okay, like the tree that I was talking about. You stop climbing towards others and you start growing toward yourself, and you start prioritizing your own self-growth. So instead of thinking oh, how can I get them to love me? How can I get them to see me? You start asking yourself instead, how can I be rooted in love no matter who stays or who lives? Right? How can I start to be rooted in my own self-love, my own self-care, and turning that attention more to myself, and no matter what happens in my life? That's the question you start to ask yourself when your wood element is balanced. And when I actually healed my limerence, I also healed this imbalance in my BaZi chart. So if you're interested in this, reach out to me. Okay, I have some links down below where you can actually check out your chart as well, but you probably need a bit of guidance in reading it. You can just reach out to me. It's very interesting because limerence, like I said, is a kind of energetic space. There are certain people whose energy spaces tend to make them a little bit more limerent than other people, but it's okay. We can just learn how to balance all of that out. So what does healing actually look like? Firstly, there are lots of healing practices. Okay, I have a lot in my book, and you can grab it down in the link below. But one of the first things that I like, very small, very practical, very easy to do steps towards healing. So one of the things that I like to do back then when I was limerent was that I had this thing called a longing inventory. So what you do is that you write down each moment when you think about them, and you ask yourself, what am I really hoping for here? Am I hoping for safety? Do I want validation? Is it a sense of being chosen? Is it a sense of being seen or of being loved? So for me, I used to look at my limerent object's photos, okay, and imagine him looking at me that way, imagine him missing me and things like that. But the truth is, I just wanted to feel like I mattered to someone. It doesn't really matter who it was, but I wanted to feel like I was seen and I was loved by someone. The second thing that you can actually do is what I call a mirror ritual. So each morning, look into your eyes in the mirror and say affirming positive stuff to yourself. I love you, to your reflection. I am my own home. I want to come back to myself. Anything that you can think of. I used to think this was really, really stupid because whenever I did this mirror ritual, I'll be staring at myself, and I would have this whole list of affirmations, and I would just be reading all these affirmations myself, and I was just thinking, oh, this is really, really stupid. But it helped so much because it then went beyond the mirror, where I was actually using affirmations in other places in my life as well. At work, whenever I felt nervous before a presentation, whenever I felt nervous about doing something, I would actually take out my affirmations and just read it to myself, and they became a bit of a mantra. Okay, so mirror ritual actually really changed my life. So I really hope that you can also find some time to actually integrate this practice into your daily life. You might find it silly at first, but just stick with it, okay? And when you're doing this ritual, you might cry, okay? You might feel very sorry and very teary for the self that you have abandoned. that's okay. Just keep showing up for yourself, keep telling yourself that you're amazing, and sooner or later, it would help to actually really, really strengthen your sense of self. Another thing that you can do is called morning love letters to yourself. So before checking your phone or reading any email or anything like that, just write one kind sentence to yourself. Even if it's just like, oh, I see how much you are hurting and I love you, or it's just like, oh, I want today to be a great day for you. Something very simple that kind of kickstarts your day, by instilling a little bit of kindness in your life to yourself. This is actually something that really helped me when when I was limerent, but when I was down as well. And I would do this pretty often when before I went to bed as well. So it was kind of ingrained, in my subconscious. So try this in the morning, try this in the evening, whenever it works for you. And let me know how it goes. And the very last but not least practice that I would actually encourage you to take on is just do one neglected thing for yourself. So when I was deep in limerence, I actually completely stopped caring about my hobbies. I neglected all my hobbies. Things that was actually very, very exciting and very interesting to me, I completely stopped them. So I stopped reading. I stopped attending other social events. I stopped painting and being interested in art. I stopped learning how to take care of myself. And I forgot what it was like to be immersed in me, in myself. So when I was trying to heal from break up the whole like toxic cycle of limerence, right? I tried it by going to the library. So I went to a library, I borrowed a few books, and I just got into reading, for like half an hour to 1 hour each day before bed. And I still started to pick up my brush again. And I started painting, like really, really small stuff. I started painting, I started doing like various arts and crafts that really, really relaxed me, and really kind of was the first couple of steps into bringing me into this healing process. So I want you to do that for yourself. Ask yourself, what have you forgotten? What were some of the things that you actually really love doing, but because you're so caught up with this new limerent object, you have completely abandoned it? Can you return to it? Even for 5 minutes each day, it makes a lot of difference. And every time you do, your nervous system then learns, I don't have to abandon myself anymore. I'm choosing myself over and over again. And whenever you show up for your, these practices, and you show up for your hobbies, or you show up for things that you want to do for yourself, you start to build up your self-confidence. You start to build up your sense of self again. And this is how you actually slowly start to step outside of the limerent cycle. So, if whatever I said today in this video actually really speaks to your heart, if you are in the ache and the yearning of limerence, and you really want to come home to yourself, you really want to be yourself all over again, I invite you to explore a couple of my offerings. So I do have a healing limerence workshop that is coming up really soon in the fall of 2025. I also have my books on limerence and other energy healing patterns as well. I also have private consults below. So links are all down below. You can see what actually fits you more in your healing journey, and you can get in touch with me. Okay, so just remember that you are not too much, you are not too late to this healing game. You are not late to the party, you have not missed the party, you are just right on time. We all have our own timing in life, and sometimes these things like limerence happen to us because they are here to actually teach us, something about ourselves. So do remember that you are already worth your own devotion. You are worth it. You don't need a limerent object or man to make you feel like you matter, because you already do. Okay, so thank you for listening to me, for watching this video, and this is Sonia signing off. I will see you in the next video.